My sister's best friend submitted my sister's college applications after her death, using her passwords and even mimicking her voice. When I demanded to know why, she tilted her head and said, "Wendy always said we were basically the same person. That was 2 months ago." This morning in court, she couldn't even raise her eyes as the evidence was read aloud. Imagine losing the one person who truly got you, then watching someone else systematically steal every last piece of her. That's what happened to me. A nightmare where my dead twin sister's best friend didn't just mourn her, she tried to become her, right in front of my grieving parents. The 2 a.m. call ripped my world apart. My twin sister, Wendy, the Golden Girl valedictorian debate team captain, already accepted to her dream college with a full scholarship, was gone. Just like that. I was the screw-up twin barely passing chemistry, working weekends at a coffee shop. But we were inseparable. One minute we were texting about dumb school drama. The next I was identifying her body while my parents crumbled in the hallway. Route 47, they said. She fell asleep at the wheel coming back from a college interview. Died instantly. The raw grief was a physical wound, and I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. The real horror started the day after Wendy's funeral, when her best friend Zoe showed up on our doorstep. Zoe. She'd been Wendy's ride or die since middle school, and honestly I always felt like the awkward third wheel around them. But now she was a wreck, sobbing about how she couldn't go back to her empty apartment. "Wendy was like a sister to me," she wailed, her eyes red-rimmed. "Please, I just need to feel close to her." My parents, completely shattered by their own pain, just opened their arms. "Of course, honey," Mom choked out. "Wendy would want us to take care of you." They even put her in Wendy's room. "Just temporarily," Dad said. "Until you feel better." That temporarily turned into forever. Zoe never left. That's when the real weirdness started. I swear I thought I was losing my mind. I'd see her in the hallway, wearing Wendy's favorite cream sweater, the one with the tiny pearls. When I'd ask about it, she'd just blink, feigning innocence. "Oh, Wendy said I could borrow it last month." Then her perfume. It changed. Suddenly she smelled exactly like Wendy, that signature vanilla scent. Her hair, which used to be pin straight, was now styled in Wendy's loose, beachy waves. It was like she was slowly, systematically becoming her. The breaking point? Dinner. My mom, my own mother, called her Wendy. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. "Wendy, pass the salt?" "Wendy, how was school today?" When I finally snapped and pointed it out, Mom just looked embarrassed. "Sorry, honey," she mumbled. "You girls you're both such good girls." Good girls? I was falling apart, barely eating, not showering, completely numb. But did anyone notice? No. Instead, Zoe just stepped in. She took over Wendy's part-time job at the boutique. She submitted Wendy's final college application essays. She even started texting Wendy's boyfriend, Carlos, supposedly to help him through his grief. I watched my own parents, who barely looked at me anymore, absolutely light up around Zoe. She was everything Wendy had been. Responsible, charming, perfect. And me? I was just the broken leftover twin nobody knew what to do with. Invisible. Wendy's birthday was in March, and I'd been planning something for weeks. Our childhood treehouse, that was our spot. We'd carved our initials there when we were 8, and we'd always joked that if one of us died, the other would scatter their ashes there. It was our secret. But when I brought it up at dinner, Zoe immediately shook her head. "Don't you think that's a little intense?" she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Maybe we should wait until you're more emotionally stable." She actually looked at my parents, her expression a perfect picture of worry. "I'm just worried about her mental state right now." "And my dad?" He just nodded slowly. "Zoe might be right, sweetheart. You've been struggling so much lately. Wendy wouldn't want you to hurt yourself over this." Zoe even reached across the table and squeezed my hand with that absolutely sickening fake sympathy. That night, they moved Wendy's ashes into a safe in their bedroom. "For your own protection," Mom explained. I couldn't believe it. They were protecting her from me? I was losing my mind. I couldn't take it anymore. I was suffocating. The next week, while my parents were at work and Zoe was at school, I broke into their room. I'd seen Dad punch in the combination a dozen times. Wendy's birthday. Inside I found it. The small wooden box holding what was left of my sister. My hands were shaking, but I grabbed it and drove straight to our treehouse, deep in the woods behind our old elementary school. I climbed that old rope ladder we built when we were 12, my heart thudding in my chest. But when I finally reached the top, I froze. Zoe was already there, sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, Wendy's diary open in her lap. She was reading aloud in a perfect chilling imitation of Wendy's voice. "Dear Diary," she recited. "Today Zoe and I talked about how we're basically the same person." She looked up, completely unfazed, like she'd been expecting me. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said, calm as anything, closing the diary. Then she pulled out her phone. She showed me a screenshot. An acceptance email to her dream college but addressed to Wendy. "I've been living as Wendy online for months now," she explained, a terrifyingly serene smile spreading across her face. Her social media, her email, even her relationship with Carlos. I got into college using her essay. Wendy always said we were like twins anyway. And for one horrifying, gut-wrenching moment, she looked exactly like my sister. "Now we really can be," she whispered. Things only got crazier. I slowly backed towards the ladder, clutching Wendy's ashes to my chest, my heart pounding like a drum. Zoe, completely unbothered, kept scrolling, then tilted her phone to show me an entire email thread with the college admissions office. Months of correspondence, all sent after Wendy died. Every message perfectly mimicked Wendy's writing, right down to her quirky use of semicolons. She'd truly become her. I found the first rung of the ladder, but Zoe subtly shifted, blocking my escape. She stroked the diary in her lap, that same nervous gesture Wendy used. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I screamed. Screamed about stealing Wendy's life, about her being a fraud, about how twisted this whole thing was. My voice cracked, shrill, echoing through the trees. I sounded unhinged. She waited until I ran out of breath, then, in that same infuriatingly calm voice, suggested we share Wendy's identity. She'd handle the online stuff, the college applications, and I could keep the family memories. Like she was proposing we split a pizza, not my dead sister's very existence. The wooden box, my sister's ashes, slipped from my sweaty hands. It clattered to the floor, rolling towards the unfinished edge of the treehouse. I lunged, forgetting escape, my fingers barely catching it before it tumbled 20 feet into the leaves below. As I scrambled to secure it, Zoe's fingers flew across her phone screen. A pre-made group chat. Family emergency contacts. She fired off messages with terrifying speed, like she'd rehearsed this. My phone? No signal. We were too deep in the woods. But somehow, her messages were going through. My parents got a text about my breakdown at a dangerous location. The school counselor got one about my suicidal behavior. Carlos got a warning that I was threatening self-harm in the treehouse. All sent in seconds. All painting Zoe as the concerned friend trying to save me. I abandoned my dead phone and started climbing down carefully, the ashes tucked under my arm. But Zoe? She just swung her legs over the edge, shimmying down the tree trunk like Wendy had taught her years ago. She was on the ground before I was even halfway. By the time my feet touched earth, she was standing at the base of the ladder, arms outstretched like she was ready to catch me. Her whole body language screamed, "Concerned friend helping unstable person." She even managed to make her eyes water. Then I heard it. Car doors slamming. My stomach dropped. My parents burst through the tree line, still in their work clothes. Mom's heels sinking into the mud, Dad's tie flapping. The moment they appeared, Zoe's tears became full-blown sobs. Her whole body shook as she stumbled towards them, one hand pressed to her chest. She looked exactly like someone who just witnessed their friend having a mental breakdown. Every gesture, every expression, perfectly calibrated. And me? I stood there, clutching Wendy's ashes like a shield, dirt on my clothes, hair wild from the wind. Next to Zoe's composed distress, I looked precisely like what she described in her messages. Unhinged, dangerous, unstable. Carlos arrived minutes later, his face tight with worry. Zoe immediately showed him her phone, scrolling through what she claimed were threatening texts from me. I caught a glimpse, messages I'd never sent about ending it all and joining Wendy. The timestamps showed they'd been sent over the past week. She'd prepared everything. Fake messages, preset emergency contacts, even this perfect, no-signal location. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a trap, weeks, maybe months in the making. The diary lay open on the ground where it had fallen. The wind ruffled its pages and I saw it. Wendy's actual handwriting mixed with something else. Newer entries, slightly different ink, the letters too careful, too studied. Zoe had been practicing Wendy's handwriting, adding her own twisted narrative to my sister's private thoughts. I reached for the diary, desperate to expose the forgery, but my sudden movement made everyone flinch back. Mom gasped. Dad moved protectively in front of Zoe. Even Carlos looked wary. To them, I was the aggressor, the unstable twin about to lash out. Zoe picked up the diary herself, cradling it gently. She held it out to my parents with shaking hands, explaining how she'd been keeping it safe, how she'd found it in Wendy's room and couldn't bear to let it go. Her performance was flawless. The school guidance counselor arrived next, followed by 2 police officers called about a mental health crisis. The tiny clearing filled with people, all focused on me, all seeing exactly what Zoe had orchestrated them to see. I stood there, clutching my sister's ashes, while Zoe sobbed about how worried she was, how I'd been acting erratically for weeks, how she'd tried to help but I'd become fixated on her, blaming her for Wendy's death. Every word painted me deeper into the corner she'd built. The counselor approached me slowly, her voice that careful tone she used with troubled students. She asked if I wanted to hurt myself, if I'd been taking anything, why I'd stolen the ashes from my parents' room. Each question made me look worse, more unstable, more dangerous. Zoe had won this round completely. She'd turned my attempt to honor Wendy into evidence of my instability. She'd twisted my grief into something that needed to be managed, controlled, fixed. And she'd done it all playing the part of the concerned friend, the grieving almost sister who just wanted everyone to heal. The officer suggested I just come with them for a talk, to make sure I was safe. My parents nodded, relief warring with exhaustion on their faces. They thought they were helping me. They thought Zoe was helping me. Everyone did. As they led me away, I saw Zoe slip her arm through my mother's, a gesture of comfort. She'd won this battle. But we both knew the war was just beginning. It was ending with one of us erased from this family, and she'd just taken the first major step to make sure it was me. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed after hours at the hospital being evaluated. They'd release me with a referral for grief counseling, and a heavy suggestion to avoid stressful situations. But I couldn't shake the chilling details. Those fake texts, ready to go. The signal in the woods when no one else had one. The practiced handwriting in Wendy's diary. How long had she been planning this? My phone had 37 missed calls and twice as many texts. I couldn't bring myself to read them. Zoe was already at the breakfast table when I came downstairs, wearing Wendy's favorite Saturday morning sweatshirt. She was helping Mom make pancakes, using Wendy's special cinnamon recipe. The domestic scene was so sickeningly normal, it made my skin crawl. She looked up, concern flooding her features. How are you feeling? Did you sleep okay? Do you need anything? Every word dripped with false sympathy, but my parents beamed at her thoughtfulness. To them, she was the stable one, the helpful one, handling grief in a healthy way. The school counselor called during breakfast, needing Wendy's transcripts for scholarship deadlines. My parents looked lost, unsure how to access Wendy's student portal. But Zoe? She immediately volunteered. Oh, Wendy shared all her login info with me months ago for a group project. Another lie. But who could prove it? Wendy wasn't here to contradict her, and I had already been painted as unreliable. I watched Zoe pull up the portal on her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys with disturbing familiarity. She'd been in Wendy's accounts for who knows how long, learning every password, every security question, every digital footprint my sister had left behind. Dad even brought up my episode, comparing it to when Grandpa died, saying we all handle grief differently. He meant it kindly, but I saw Zoe's eyes light up. She was filing it away, another tool to use against me. My legitimate anger would now be filtered through the lens of complicated grief. Every outburst, proof I needed help, not evidence of her deception. The family group chat became Zoe's next weapon. She'd screenshot my late-night messages, the ones where I vented about missing Wendy, about sleepless nights, about feeling like I was losing my mind. Out of context, they looked terrifying. She shared them with concerned relatives, painting a picture of someone spiraling out of control. My attempts to expose her on social media backfired spectacularly. Every post I made about her lies got flagged as harassment. My accounts were temporarily restricted, cutting off another avenue to tell the truth. Meanwhile, Zoe kept posting from Wendy's accounts, maintaining the illusion my sister was still digitally present. She'd inherited everything that required a simple password change. Wendy's car insurance, her Netflix, her Spotify playlist. Small things that shouldn't matter, but felt like death by 1,000 cuts. I discovered the depth of it when Wendy's recently played list on Spotify showed songs I knew my sister hated, artists Zoe loved, but Wendy always skipped. The exhaustion hit me like a wall during dinner that night. Days of running on adrenaline and pure rage just collapsed. My head drooped over my plate of pasta, and I jerked awake to find my parents exchanging worried looks. Mom whispered something to Dad about substance abuse, wondering if I was taking something to cope. Zoe, playing the concerned friend again, reached over to study my water glass. She suggested I go to bed early, get some rest. Her tone was gentle, but I heard the satisfaction underneath. Every sign of my deterioration was another victory for her. Emma, my best friend, finally responded to my desperate text the next day. We met at the park, but she looked so uncomfortable. Her boyfriend, she explained, was pressuring her to distance herself. He thought I was becoming toxic, that my obsession with Zoe was unhealthy. She believed me, she insisted, but she couldn't handle the chaos. She had her own life, her own future. The words stung more than any of Zoe's lies. My best friend was choosing her relationship over the truth, abandoning me when I needed her most. The isolation spread like a virus. The grocery store clerk crossed the street when she saw me. The barista at my weekend job mentioned hearing concerning things from other customers. The entire town seemed to be discussing my family situation, and Zoe had expertly shaped the narrative. I even tried to catch her in a lie about a college interview timeline. For a moment, triumph surged through me. Finally, proof. But when I investigated, I realized I'd forgotten Wendy's doctor appointment that day. My sister had rescheduled the interview to make the appointment. My victory turned to ash. Being right about one tiny, easily explainable lie just made me look more obsessive, desperately grasping at straws. The neighbors who witnessed my moment of satisfaction saw only inappropriate celebration, another sign I wasn't grieving normally. That night, Zoe and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. The pretense dropped, just for a moment, and we stared at each other with naked understanding. This was a war of attrition, and only one of us would survive it. She'd already claimed Wendy's digital life, her possessions, her place in our parents' hearts. Soon, there'd be nothing left of my sister that wasn't filtered through Zoe's performance. We both knew how this ended. One of us completely erased from the family, written out of the narrative. And with every passing day, every successful manipulation, Zoe made it clearer which one of us that would be. The silence between us stretched until Mom walked in. Zoe immediately brightened, offering to make tea. I watched her move through our kitchen with sickening ease, knowing exactly which cupboard held the chamomile, which drawer had the honey spoons. She'd mapped every inch of our home like a general studying enemy territory, and she was conquering it piece by piece. Then Emma's older brother, Nathan, showed up at the coffee shop during my Saturday shift. He ordered a complicated drink, then just lingered. His concern seemed genuine. He mentioned Emma was worried. But then he brought up Zoe, how helpful she'd been, how she'd offered to tutor his younger sister in debate. He quoted something about resilience through grief, and I instantly recognized Wendy's favorite poem. Zoe had fed him those exact words. My hands shook as I made his drink. Another piece of my sister casually deployed like ammunition. Nathan left his number, suggesting we all get together. The way he said it made my stomach turn. Zoe wasn't just stealing Wendy's life. She was expanding her influence, creating new connections, new allies, using Wendy's memory as currency. That evening, my parents recounted a dinner conversation differently. Mom swore Zoe had suggested family therapy. Dad swore she'd recommended individual counseling for me first. Neither noticed the discrepancy, but I saw Zoe's technique clearly now. Plant different seeds with different people. Let confusion do the rest. I spent hours searching old texts until I found what I dreaded. A thread from last year where Wendy had vented about feeling overshadowed by me. Sometimes I feel invisible next to her, she'd written. The words stung. I'd forgotten that fight, dismissed her feelings. Now those words would be twisted into evidence of my jealousy, my instability. My 5-year-old cousin Kathy visited that weekend. She'd always been shy around me, but she warmed up to Zoe instantly. During lunch, Kathy asked, "Why does Wendy seem sad now? Why doesn't she laugh as much?" The innocent question froze everyone. Zoe's eyes welled up as she hugged Kathy, whispering that sometimes people need extra love when they're healing. Later, I overheard Kathy tell her mom that Wendy said her sister was too sick to play right now. The poisoning of my extended family had begun. Then, a glimmer of hope. Doorbell camera footage. My neighbor mentioned seeing Wendy and Zoe arguing the week before the accident. My pulse raced as I convinced him to show me. There they were, gesturing animatedly on our front porch. The audio was muffled, but the rhythm of raised voices was undeniable. Still, it was something. I filed a petition with family court, claiming Zoe was manipulating my grieving parents. The clerk's expression shifted from sympathy to concern as she read my rambling statement. She handed me forms about emergency guardianship. She completely misunderstood. I wasn't trying to control my parents, I was trying to protect them. But my words came out jumbled, desperate, making me sound exactly like Zoe had portrayed. Unstable, controlling. Desperation drove me to try accessing our shared family accounts. I knew Wendy's password patterns, variations of her birthday. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Success. An old savings account we'd opened in high school. I quickly changed the password, blocking Zoe from funds she had no right to. And then the browser's autofill revealed something that made my heart hammer. Wendy had searched how to tell parents about concerning friend, just days before her death. Wendy had seen something, noticed something about Zoe that worried her. But the search history ended there. No clicked links, no further exploration. Whatever she'd discovered, she had taken it with her. During mandatory grief counseling, I made the mistake of being honest. I told the counselor I didn't feel safe at home, that I felt like I was being erased. She took notes with increasing concern, asking probing questions about self-harm, about whether I had plans to hurt myself or others. I realized too late how my words sounded. By law, she'd have to report this. I tried to record Zoe's contradictions during dinner, phone hidden, but the battery died just as she started talking about Wendy's college plans. The notification sound made everyone look at me. Zoe's smile was subtle, triumphant. She knew exactly what I'd been trying to do. The after-school pickup schedule became another weapon. Zoe volunteered for family errands, ensuring she was always there when my parents got home. They saw me at my worst, exhausted, frustrated, unwashed. They saw her at her best, helpful, composed, bringing groceries and good news about scholarship deadlines. Mrs. Catherine, Wendy's favorite teacher, had always liked me too. I thought she'd help. But as I explained, her expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. The next day she called. She'd received a complaint about unprofessional involvement in family matters. Her tenure review was coming up. She couldn't risk her career. Another ally lost. I thought, the words a bitter echo. One night, unable to sleep, I found Zoe in Wendy's bed. She was wearing Wendy's lavender pajamas, the ones with tiny stars my sister bought for college. The room reeked of Wendy's fabric softener. Zoe's eyes opened when I entered, but she didn't move, didn't explain. We just stared at each other in the darkness until I retreated, utterly sickened. The next morning she made an offer. One piece of Wendy's jewelry. You can choose anything if you stop making accusations. Her tone was so reasonable, like she was being generous. It made me want to vomit. She was negotiating with my sister's possessions, like they were hers to give. My refusal triggered a family meeting. Dad talked about healing, moving forward, how Wendy would want us to be a family. Mom cried, saying my behavior was preventing everyone from processing their grief properly. Zoe sat quietly, occasionally squeezing their hands. The meeting ended with them suggesting I might benefit from spending some time away, maybe with relatives. The exile they proposed was gentle but clear. I was being pushed out. Then, a crushing realization from that doorbell camera footage. I watched it obsessively, frame by frame, trying to read lips. Wendy stood between Zoe and the door, gesturing, mediating. Her body language screamed stress and exhaustion. She kept looking between Zoe and something off camera, probably me, visible through the window. It hit me like cold water. Wendy had been trying to keep the peace between us. The stress on her face wasn't about Zoe's concerning behavior. It was about our conflict. She'd been caught in the middle, trying to hold everyone together. The very thing I thought was evidence of Zoe's guilt became proof of my own contribution to Wendy's stress. I accessed Wendy's private journal app on her tablet in the living room while my parents were at work. My hands trembled as I scrolled through entries. There it was, documented in painful detail. Wendy's exhaustion at mediating between Zoe and me. Her frustration at my jealousy. Her desperate attempts to include Zoe more, hoping it would ease the tension. One entry stopped me cold. I just want everyone to get along. Is that so much to ask? Sometimes I think the only solution is to give each of them what they need. Zoe needs family, and my sister needs space from the competition she imagines exists. My sister seeing me as the competition, the source of stress. Dad confronted me that evening about accessing the journal. His disappointment was palpable. Zoe had noticed the tablet's activity, he explained, and was concerned about privacy violations. He had to choose, he said, between enabling my obsession and protecting the family's healing process. The choice was clear in his eyes. Zoe needed them now. Wendy, he believed, would have wanted them to take care of her friend. My access to family resources dwindled. The car became unavailable. Family dinners happened while I was at work. The subtle exclusion felt deliberate, but impossible to prove. Every attempt to address it made me sound paranoid, selfish, jealous. In desperation, I started adopting Zoe's tactics. I created fake screenshots showing contradictions in her stories. But my photo editing was amateur, obvious. When I tried to present them, the fabrication was immediately apparent. I destroyed my own credibility trying to fight fire with fire. The boutique where Wendy worked became my next target. I manufactured a reason to visit, pretending to shop. The manager recognized me, her sympathy genuine but guarded. I steered the conversation toward Wendy's work schedule, looking for discrepancies in Zoe's claims. But the staff had been told I was struggling with grief. They answered carefully, kindly, revealing nothing useful. Our family iPad, auto-logged into shared cloud accounts, was an accidental discovery. Suddenly, I had access to email backups, document histories, browser data. My fingers flew, screenshotting everything before Zoe realized the security breach. The login notifications would go to Wendy's old phone, wherever that was. I had a window, but it was closing fast. Benjamin, Wendy's ex from junior year, reached out through social media. His messages were cautious, asking about money Wendy had borrowed for application fees, scholarship transfers that didn't make sense. Finally, someone else noticed irregularities. But his interest was financial, not justice. He wanted his money back, not the truth exposed. The parent-teacher conference notification arrived while I was dealing with Benjamin's questions. Terrible timing. I missed it entirely, marked absent while trying to gather evidence. Zoe attended in my place, discussing my academic struggles with concerned teachers. Another mark against me, another example of her responsibility versus my chaos. My manager at the coffee shop pulled me aside about my performance. Too many personal calls, too much drama affecting customer service. My hours were reduced. I needed the money, the routine, the escape. Even that was being taken from me. Meanwhile, Zoe had seamlessly taken over Wendy's boutique position, earning steady income, appearing helpful and responsible. The confrontation at Wendy's favorite coffee shop wasn't planned. I saw Zoe there with Emma and Nathan, laughing over lattes like everything was normal. My approach was aggressive, my words too loud. The teenage baristas who'd known us both since middle school watched in horror as I accused Zoe of theft, of fraud, of destroying my family. Security footage would later show me looking deranged, pointing and shouting while Zoe remained perfectly calm, trying to defuse the situation. Emma pulled Nathan away, both looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear. My reputation was completely, publicly damaged. My tutoring job evaporated next. Parents complained about my emotional volatility. The agency suggested I take time off to focus on my health. The replacement tutor they recommended? From Zoe's suggestion list. Every avenue of normal life was being systematically closed off. I started sleeping in my car some nights, parked outside our house. Wendy's room glowed with warm light as Zoe maintained our family's evening routines. Through the window, I watched her help with dishes, play board games, fill the space I'd abandoned. She wasn't replacing Wendy anymore. She was replacing me. Mom found me in the car one morning, her tears genuine as she begged me to come inside, to stop torturing myself. But her words revealed Zoe's narrative. I was destroying what was left of our family, dishonoring Wendy's memory with my vendetta. She pleaded with me to let my sister rest peacefully, instead of using her death as a weapon against an innocent friend. The boutique investigation I'd initiated backfired spectacularly. My questions about inventory records led to an innocent coworker being questioned about discrepancies that didn't exist. She had a young daughter, a college boyfriend threatening to leave over the workplace drama. I watched her cry in the break room, overheard her daughter asking why mommy was scared. My pursuit of justice was creating collateral damage. The boyfriend followed through on his threat. He couldn't be associated with fraud investigations. His reputation, his future career. It all mattered more. Another life disrupted. Another person hurt by my desperate need for truth. But I couldn't stop. The evidence was there, scattered across digital footprints and paper trails. Each piece alone meant nothing. But together they painted a clear picture. I just needed people to look to see what I saw. The cost of that vision was becoming unbearable. Emma's exhausted honesty hit harder than any of Zoe's lies. She cornered me after the coffee shop incident, her patience finally worn thin. What if Wendy really had loved Zoe like a sister? She asked. What if your jealousy is coloring everything you see? The question hung between us and I couldn't immediately answer. Doubt crept in like poison. I made a calculated decision to admit my past jealousy publicly. During a family gathering, I acknowledged the resentment I'd felt, the competition I'd imagined. The admission was meant to establish credibility for my current concerns, but it backfired. Everyone saw it as the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. I was finally admitting the real problem was me. The evidence I'd gathered revealed more than just Zoe's deception. Wendy's final email showed her deep stress about our family finances, her worry about our parents' struggling business. She'd actually been considering deferring college to help them. I'd been so wrapped up in my own drama, my own grief, that I'd completely missed my sister's quiet sacrifice. The guilt was suffocating. Then, my parents' lawyer arrived with paperwork for a harassment protection order. They were filing it on Zoe's behalf, moving the court date up by weeks. Our family lawyer was conveniently on vacation, leaving me to navigate the legal system alone. The papers painted me as unstable, obsessive, a danger to a grieving young woman who'd lost her best friend. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Zoe's true motivation finally became clear during a moment of raw, twisted honesty. She genuinely believed Wendy had chosen her, had wanted her to take over, to become the sister I'd failed to be. Years of feeling like an outsider, of watching our bond from the periphery, had twisted into something delusional, yet sincere. Her grief was real, even if her methods were monstrous. The childhood trauma she'd experienced, the unstable home, absent parents, constant moving, it all poured out in a rehearsed monologue designed to garner sympathy. But underneath the performance I saw genuine pain. She needed to belong somewhere, to someone. Wendy had been that person and now she was gone. To prove the identity theft, I had to violate every promise I'd made to Wendy about keeping her secrets. Her private struggles, her doubts about college, her fears about not living up to expectations. I had to expose it all. Each revelation felt like another betrayal. I was dishonoring my sister's memory to save it from being stolen. The person I'd been, the one who protected Wendy's privacy, who kept her confidence, had to die. In her place rose someone strategic, calculating, willing to hurt others for a greater good. I hated who I was becoming but saw no alternative. My chance came at Zoe's part-time job. She'd gotten careless, left herself logged into Wendy's email on the work computer. While the manager stepped away, I screenshot everything. Transaction histories, password changes, the digital trail of her deception. My hands shook as I forwarded the evidence to myself, knowing I was violating workplace trust, but unable to stop. This was it. Real proof. The minor legal victory felt hollow. The court acknowledged some irregularities in Zoe's claims, but stopped short of calling it fraud. The real triumph, though, was watching Zoe realize her carefully constructed web was unraveling. But even as tears streamed down her face at Wendy's grave, both of us crying, both calling her sister, I felt no satisfaction. Zoe filed a counterclaim for emotional distress, her lawyer arguing I'd conducted a campaign of harassment against a grieving young woman. The family court mediator seemed sympathetic to her position. Without criminal charges, this was just a messy family dispute about grief and boundaries. Everything hinged on the guidance counselor's testimony about the college application process. She held the official records, the timestamps that would prove Zoe had submitted documents after Wendy's death. But her position was precarious. The school didn't want scandal. Parents were nervous about data security. Her cooperation wasn't guaranteed. The leverage came from an unexpected source. Zoe's younger brother. I tutored him in math 2 years ago, and he still had my number. His innocent text, "Why are you being mean to my sister now?" opened a door. Through him, I learned about Zoe's patterns. Her previous fixations on friends, the way she'd always needed to become someone else to feel worthy of love. School staff began choosing sides based on liability and relationships. Those who'd known Wendy supported the truth quietly. Those who feared lawsuits supported Zoe publicly. The divide created chaos in the administrative response to my evidence requests. The revelation about different court systems hit me hard. Family court could issue protection orders, but had no power over criminal fraud. That required a separate process, different evidence standards, prosecutors who saw enough value in pursuing the case. I was fighting on multiple fronts with diminishing resources. Wendy's debate team contacts proved more loyal to her memory than expected. They remembered her fondly, owed her for tournament hosting team support. One contact, now a law student, provided a character reference. But when pressed to testify about academic fraud, about the implications for their own careers, they retreated. They'd help from the shadows but wouldn't step into the light. The revelation about Wendy's college deferral plans reframed everything. She'd been planning to stay to help our parents through their financial crisis. The urgency Zoe showed in submitting applications made more sense now. She was trying to secure Wendy's future before it could be sacrificed. The twisted logic almost made sense if you squinted, but it confirmed the timeline manipulation. Wendy couldn't have submitted those final essays because she'd been planning to defer. The evidence was there in her browser history, her saved drafts about gap year programs, about working to help the family. Zoe had stolen not just her identity, but her chance to make her own choice. The guidance counselor's files were subpoenaed. The school fought it initially, citing privacy concerns, but the court order was clear. The backup files would show submission timestamps, IP addresses, the digital fingerprints that would prove Zoe's fraud. The counselor looked visibly relieved to have the decision taken out of her hands. The files revealed more than we'd expected. Wendy's final weeks had been consumed with worry about family stability. Her essays mentioned it. Her counselor notes documented it. She'd been carrying burdens none of us had seen. Too focused on our own dramas to notice her quiet struggle. The truth was harder to accept than the lies. Wendy had chosen family over her dreams. Had planned to sacrifice her future for our stability. My fight for justice now meant honoring that choice. Protecting the family she died trying to preserve. But that family now included Zoe, twisted into our grief like a parasitic vine. I committed to honoring Wendy's values despite the personal cost. The legal battles would continue, but I'd fight them with dignity, with the grace Wendy would have shown. No more manufactured evidence, no more desperate schemes, just truth presented calmly, letting the facts speak for themselves. Zoe's overconfidence, ironically, led to her first major mistake. In her notarized harassment complaint, she cited dates that flat-out contradicted her previous sworn statements. The timeline inconsistencies were subtle but damning. Her lawyer tried to dismiss them as grief-related confusion, but the pattern was too clear. I presented the evidence without gloating, maintaining the composure Wendy would have wanted. The mediator's expression shifted as she reviewed the contradictions. For the first time, Zoe looked genuinely worried. The documentary evidence was speaking louder than either of our emotional appeals. The momentum shifted slowly, inevitably. Each piece of evidence built on the last, creating a pattern too consistent to ignore. Zoe's supporters began asking questions, looking closer at the stories they had accepted. The truth was finally emerging, not through my accusations, but through Zoe's own contradictions. Both sides prepared for the final hearing. Extended family members were subpoenaed, forced to choose sides publicly. Teachers, friends, neighbors, everyone touched by this tragedy would have to bear witness. Our entire world was compressed into that small courtroom. A few hours of testimony that would determine everything. The seating arrangements alone told a story. Who sat behind whom, who avoided eye contact, who whispered in corners. The physical space mapped our fractured relationships, showing in stark relief what Zoe's deception had cost us all. Some bridges had been burned by necessity. Others maybe were still salvageable. But first we had to get through the depositions. Each conversation, each piece of evidence, each testimony building toward a conclusion that I knew would satisfy no one completely. Justice in family court was always imperfect, always incomplete. The best we could hope for was truth acknowledged, boundaries established, and some path forward that honored Wendy's memory while protecting the living. The war between Zoe and me was entering its final phase. Only one version of history would survive. Only one of us would remain fully part of this family. The battle lines were drawn, the evidence gathered, the witnesses prepared. Everything Wendy had loved was at stake. Everything she tried to protect hung in the balance. The next few weeks would determine whether her sacrifice meant anything, whether truth could triumph over a perfectly crafted lie. The irony wasn't lost on me. In fighting to preserve Wendy's memory, I'd become someone she wouldn't recognize. In trying to save our family, I'd helped destroy it. But there was no turning back. The machinery of justice, imperfect as it was, had been set in motion. We were all trapped in the tragedy Zoe had orchestrated, and I had, in my desperation, escalated. The only way out was through. Through the depositions, through the hearings, through the painful process of untangling truth from lies, through the grief we'd all been avoiding by focusing on the conflict. Wendy was gone. That was the only truth that really mattered. Everything else, the fraud, the deception, the legal battles, was just noise around that central devastating fact. But noise that had to be addressed before any of us could truly mourn. The middle act of our tragedy was ending. The final confrontation loomed, promising resolution without healing, justice without peace. We'd all been changed by this conflict, twisted into versions of ourselves we barely recognized. But somewhere in the legal briefs and testimony transcripts, Wendy's true voice might still be heard. Not the version Zoe performed or the one I remembered, but the real girl who died trying to hold everyone together. That was the memory worth fighting for. The truth worth preserving, even if it cost us everything else. The subpoenaed files arrived at the courthouse 3 days before our hearing. I watched the guidance counselor's hands tremble as she handed over the sealed envelope to the court clerk. Her relief was palpable, her shoulders dropping, finally free of the burden she'd been carrying. The school's IT administrator authenticated the backup files that afternoon. His testimony was brief but devastating. Login timestamps showed Wendy's portal access repeatedly after her death, always from IP addresses matching Zoe's devices. The digital breadcrumbs led straight to her laptop, her phone, even the public library computer she'd used trying to cover her tracks. I sat in the gallery, watching Zoe's lawyer scramble to explain the evidence. His arguments grew increasingly desperate as each timestamp was verified. The judge's expression remained neutral, but I saw her taking extensive notes. The documentary evidence was building a wall Zoe couldn't climb over. That evening, I discovered Wendy's debate team had been conducting their own investigation. One member, now in law school, had compiled a detailed timeline of Wendy's final weeks. She'd noticed discrepancies in tournament registrations, team communications that didn't match Wendy's usual patterns. The folder she handed me contained photocopies, screenshots, witness statements from teammates who'd stayed silent until now. The revelation about our parents' financial crisis hit during a deposition. Dad admitted their business had been failing for months. Wendy had known. She'd been secretly researching gap year programs, ways to help without abandoning her education entirely. The browser history I'd found wasn't about escaping. It was about finding balance between family duty and personal dreams. Zoe's younger brother appeared at my car window one night while I sat outside the house. His 8-year-old face was confused, hurt. He showed me texts from Zoe, instructions about what to say if anyone asked about their childhood. The manipulation extended even to him, turning family loyalty into another weapon. I drove him home, watching him disappear into their small apartment. Through the window, I saw their mother passed out on the couch, empty bottles scattered around her. The unstable home Zoe had described wasn't fabrication. The trauma was real, even if her response to it had become monstrous. The next morning brought another revelation. Benjamin had been digging deeper into the scholarship transfers. He discovered Zoe had attempted to redirect funds meant for Wendy into her own accounts. The fraud extended beyond identity theft into financial crimes. His evidence packet included bank statements, forged signatures, a paper trail of deception. My parents' faces during the preliminary hearing showed their dawning realization. Each piece of evidence chipped away at their certainty. Mom's hand found mine during a recess, squeezing gently. No words, just acknowledgement that maybe, possibly, I hadn't been wrong. The college admissions officer testified via video link, her testimony clinical, focused on protecting institutional integrity. She confirmed the application submitted after Wendy's death. The IP addresses that didn't match any previous submissions. The fraud was undeniable from an administrative standpoint. Zoe's breakdown began during her own deposition. Her carefully constructed persona cracked as contradictions mounted. She insisted Wendy had wanted this, had told her to take over if anything happened. But when pressed for specifics, for proof of these conversations, she faltered. Her lawyer requested multiple recesses as she struggled to maintain composure. The judge ordered psychological evaluations for both of us. I submitted to mine willingly, answering questions about grief, about family dynamics, about my methods of investigation. The psychologist noted my exhaustion, my single-minded focus, but found no evidence of the instability Zoe had claimed. Zoe's evaluation revealed something different. Years of identity confusion, of needing to become others to feel valuable. The psychologist's report described someone who genuinely believed their delusions, who'd convinced themselves that assuming Wendy's identity was honoring her memory. Extended family members began arriving for the final hearing. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all forced to witness our family's implosion. The courthouse hallway became a map of allegiances. Some sat with my parents and me. Others gravitated towards Zoe, still seeing her as Wendy's grieving friend. The morning of the hearing, I found Wendy's favorite necklace in my car's glove compartment. I'd forgotten taking it from her room weeks ago, a desperate attempt to preserve something purely hers. I wore it into the courtroom, feeling its weight against my chest. The proceedings began with opening statements. Zoe's lawyer painted her as a traumatized young woman whose grief had led to poor decisions. My parents' lawyer, finally back from vacation, presented the pattern of systematic deception, the calculated nature of the fraud. Witness after witness took the stand. Teachers who'd noticed changes in Wendy's communication style, friends who'd received strange messages, the boutique manager who'd been confused by scheduling changes. Each testimony added another piece to the puzzle. When Zoe took the stand, her performance was subdued. Gone was the confident manipulator. In her place sat someone who looked lost, younger than her years. She admitted to accessing Wendy's accounts, but insisted it was to preserve her friend's legacy, to ensure her dreams weren't abandoned. Her testimony revealed the depth of her delusion. She spoke about conversations with Wendy that I knew had never happened, plans they'd supposedly made. In her mind, she'd created an alternate history where Wendy had chosen her as a successor, where taking over her life was an act of love. The judge's questions were precise, cutting through emotion to reach facts. When had she first accessed Wendy's email? Why had she submitted college applications in a dead girl's name? How did she justify the financial transfers? Each answer dug her deeper into legal consequences. My own testimony focused on facts, not feelings. I presented the evidence I'd gathered, the timeline I'd constructed. I admitted to my desperate methods, my own poor choices in pursuit of truth. But I maintained that Wendy deserved to rest in peace, not be puppeteered by someone else's need for belonging. The courtroom was silent as I described finding Zoe in the treehouse, the calculated way she'd orchestrated my breakdown. Several family members wiped away tears. Even Zoe's supporters looked shaken by the methodical nature of her manipulation. During a recess, I overheard two aunts arguing in the bathroom. One insisted Zoe was just a grieving child who'd made mistakes. The other countered that systematic fraud wasn't a mistake, but a choice. Their voices rose until a bailiff intervened. The family fractures were widening. The final, shattering evidence came from an unexpected source. Wendy's phone. Thought lost in the crash, it had been found during car salvage. Data recovery revealed her final texts, including several expressing concern about Zoe's behavior. One message to a friend, sent the day she died, mentioned needing to talk to our parents about the Zoe situation. Zoe's face crumpled as the texts were read aloud. Whatever narrative she'd constructed in her mind couldn't survive Wendy's own words. Her lawyer requested another recess, but the judge denied it. We were past the point of delays. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. The fraud was undeniable, the evidence overwhelming. But the question remained. What did justice look like for a crime born of grief and mental illness? Criminal charges seemed excessive for someone who needed help more than punishment. The judge took 2 hours to deliberate. We waited in the hallway, camps clearly divided. Some relatives tried to bridge the gap, moving between groups with messages of reconciliation. Others sat in stony silence, relationships irreparably damaged. When we were called back, the courtroom felt smaller, heavier. The judge's ruling was methodical, addressing each aspect of the case. Zoe's access to Wendy's accounts would be permanently revoked. The fraudulent college applications would be formally withdrawn. Financial restitution would be required for any misappropriated funds. But the judge stopped short of criminal prosecution. Instead, she mandated intensive therapy and community service. Zoe would be required to speak at grief support groups about healthy versus destructive coping mechanisms. She'd work with identity theft prevention organizations. Her delusions would be addressed through professional help, not prison. The protection order I'd feared would separate me from my family was denied. Instead, the judge ordered family counseling for all of us, including Zoe, if she chose to participate. The goal was healing, not further fracturing. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt the immense weight of what we'd lost. Wendy was still gone. Our family was forever changed. Relationships had been damaged, some beyond repair. But truth had finally been acknowledged. Boundaries established. Zoe approached me in the parking lot, her face swollen from crying. She started to speak, then stopped, seeming to realize words were meaningless now. We stood there, two broken people who destroyed each other in the name of loving the same girl. My parents flanked me as we walked to the car, Dad's arm around my shoulders, Mom holding my hand. We were a family of 3 now, properly sized, properly grieving. The ghost of who Wendy had been could finally rest, without someone else wearing her skin. The drive home was silent, except for the radio playing softly. I touched Wendy's necklace, thinking about the sister I'd lost, and the imposter I'd fought. Both were gone now in different ways. What remained was the hardest part. Learning to live with the empty space without the distraction of conflict. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in weeks. No car surveillance, no desperate plotting, just exhaustion and the strange peace that comes from endings, even imperfect ones. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, continued healing, the slow work of rebuilding. But tonight, I simply existed in the truth we'd fought so hard to reveal. Wendy was gone. Zoe was getting help. Our family would survive, scarred but honest. It wasn't the justice I'd imagined, but it was real, grounded in compassion rather than revenge. The war was over. Nobody had truly won. But in the ruins of what we'd been, something new might eventually grow. For now, that possibility was enough.